Hello everyone, my name is Lowko and welcome to some more StarCraft 2 Legacy of the Void. In this game, I want to be going over one of the craziest, stupidest Zerg vs Terrans that I've played in a very long time. So in the last couple of weeks, as you guys may be aware, I've been doing a lot of Nidus play in pretty much all matchups, but specifically in Zerg vs Terran. In Zerg vs Terran, you can be playing aggressive Nidus play off of two bases versus them, and most of the time, if they don't open up with siege tank drops, and even if they do, you still have a good chance of winning, you will be able to kill them by simply transfusing the Nydus Worm over and over again, and most of the time you can just simply flood them from the inside out, you know, instead of like going past their wall, you can just sort of put down a Nydus Worm in the main base, and since it can be attacked or killed or damaged at all before you actually, you know, have the Nydus Worm 100% done, you can oftentimes just straight up win the game. Now in this Zerg vs Terran, I do end up going for a Nydus Worm, but this is a little bit wonky. It's actually really cool. So lately in Zerg vs Terran, as you already may be aware of the production tab right there, there's been a lot of cheese going on, and believe it or not, you remember the 2-base proxy Rexes that you can do in Zerg vs Terran in Heart of the Swarm and in Wings of Liberty? Right now, 3 Rex rushes are very popular, 4 Rex rushes are popular, 5 Rex rushes are popular, and it is even possible to proxy 6 barracks across the map. And with the mules that are currently in the game, you can actually support 100% production of all of that. Now in this specific game, I actually just barely don't get the scout off on this. I do see one of the SCVs right there, but it doesn't actually tell me enough. I only just now see that he is proxying the barracks is right there, and I'm like, oh my god, what is going on? So in this specific game, my opponent is gonna open up extremely aggressive, putting down 3 Rexes on my side of the map, making sure that he can ready those Marines straight across, and he's gonna try and wall me in with a bunker. He's gonna try and do as much damage as he possibly can. Now, since I did send my second Overlord across the map to try and scout for the natural, I am forced to lose this Overlord right here to his first Marine, but also to cancel my own natural. So this is starting off as a bit of an aggressive game where I'm like, oh god, I'm once again gonna lose to someone who is proxying gateways or barracks is across the map, and it's likely not gonna end very well. However, the best response that I've found so far is to cancel the natural and to go straight into a ton of spine crawlers. So as you can see in this specific game, I did manage to get the kill right there with the 3 drones on that SCV that actually was building the bunker, and I'm gonna follow this up with a ton of queens, a ton of spine crawlers, and just generally try and stay alive. Now at this point in the game, I know that in most situations, if my opponent microed this properly, or if he has any more than 3, 4, 5 barracks, I am gonna go down for sure. If he makes 2 barracks, I'll likely be able to hold it. If he makes 3 barracks, I'll likely be able to hold it as well. If he's going all in, however, off of 1 base and puts down more than 4, he's likely gonna be winning the game at this point in time, simply because I don't have the Zerg speed done, simply because I don't have all of my upgrades done yet in time either, and I'm just trying my very hardest to up-burrow the spine crawler and uproot them right now, and try and just add on more enemy units right now just to try and stay alive. So he is moving forward right now a little bit too aggressive. I noticed very quickly that a couple of these spine crawlers do a lot of damage, and while I do end up losing that gas geyser, he cannot actually hit any of my drones. So at this point in time, I'm actually feeling kind of okay-ish. I'm still not 100% sure if my opponent only put down 3 barracks or if he's actually transitioning out of this. But at this point in time, I do see with my Overlord on the minimap that he is indeed adding on a gas geyser. Now the fact of the matter is that he adds on a gas geyser. That means he's not gonna stay on this tag for very long. He's likely gonna try and transition from here as well. I do need my Zerglings right now to try and clean up as many of these Marines as I possibly can. To keep that spine crawler alive is absolutely crucial. At this point in time though, I'm still not looking that great. If you take a look at the income tab, that mule is really starting to kick in right now. Actually, he may not even have a mule up and mining. Oh, he actually does have one up and mining, but even though, you know, the worker count is relatively even, Terran players do get a magnificent boost, obviously, from those mules, and I'm in a little bit of trouble. However, it seems like the game has stabilized somewhat. It seems like the game has stabilized at least a little bit, and I'm gonna be transitioning towards a natural right now myself. Gonna try and keep that natural alive this time around, and just do as much damage as I possibly can as soon as Zergling speed finishes. My plan right now is to try and surround those bunkers and Marines, uproot the spine crawlers and break down, and maybe even take the 3rd base as well and then drone behind it. I know that I would likely be at a disadvantage at this point in the game, but I'm at the very least gonna try. Now maybe one thing that I could have done a little bit earlier is knock down the rocks that are leading out of my 3rd base, and actually expand towards the top side of the map instead. But I'm gonna be making my spine crawlers in a location where they're sort of like containing my opponent. trying to keep them alive for the best of my abilities. May actually end up losing that spine crawler right there as well, so that's a little unfortunate. But at the very least, I know that he will have a very hard time trying to get past all of the units that I got right now. I am starting to drone up once again, and very shortly, you will see that I will be going for our lair. Now, the nice thing about that new Nydus Worm is that you can actually still be winning games from this position. In Heart of the Swarm, you would only really be able to win at this point in the game if your opponent is playing poorly, if he doesn't realize exactly what is going on. But in this specific scenario, I'm actually feeling, you know, I know that I'm very far behind at this point, and I know that I simply don't have the economy to compete with the Terran player right now, but I know that I'm not in the worst of positions. So you can see I am starting to transition towards the lair right now. My natural just now finished up and I am droning up. I'm trying to make as many drones as I possibly can, and I'm trying to get away with more than I usually am able to when I'm in these kind of situations, even though they don't happen too often. Obviously, if my opponent would have been pumping Marines non-stop right now, I would have been in a lot of trouble. But putting down the Roach Warren right now, thinking that my opponent isn't, or assuming that my opponent isn't going to be any more aggressive at this point, I'm going to be putting down the Roach Warren and I'm going to start transitioning towards that lair. And once the lair finishes, I will be putting down the Nydus Worm very quickly. Now, the idea behind the Nydus Worm is to try and do crippling amounts of damage, especially when it comes to killing workers. I know that if my opponent transitions towards any kind of like standard mid game, he's likely going to be putting down a third command center relatively soon. And if he puts down a third command center relatively soon, I will be able to do a lot of damage to the exact place. So I'm gonna put down the Nydus Worm right now. I did almost end up losing that spine crawler, which is a little unfortunate, but I'm gonna be following this up with more and more units, adding on some extra Zerglings right now. I honestly should probably be adding on more queens instead, so there we go. I am actually adding on more queens now. Making sure that I spread some creep between the bases as well, so that the queens from the natural will be able to make it towards the third base, or towards the main base. But I'm just trying to add on as many units as I possibly can right now. Now, obviously, I'm gonna have to do something very important when it comes to this queen control. My opponent does pick off one of the spines, by the way. But one thing that I need to do in order to make this worthwhile is actually put the high energy queens in first. If I put in the high energy queens first in the Nydus Worm, those are also the units that pop out of the Nydus Worm first. And if I make sure that I have transfuses available, I may very well be able to get at least 2 transfuses done, which will likely mean that I can actually empty the entire Nydus Worm inside of his main base. So I got an overload in position on the other side of the map, very important obviously. Putting in the high energy queens first, putting down the Nydus Worm right between his bases, and I'm gonna be rallying all of my units straight on top of this worm. Now, this is where the game goes kind of insane. Obviously, my opponent should be in a pretty good place. I do realize right now that he's trying to knock down the rocks, which both indicates to me that he is not going to be having very many units at home at all. So I'm going to be unloading all of my units right now in the main base. Instead of trying to transfuse the Nydus Worm, it turns out not to be necessary, and I'm transfusing the queens instead to make sure that they stay alive for a little bit longer. Gonna make a couple of spine crawlers at home as well in the natural, so I will be able to start nuking away at those Hellions that are shooting up my rocks right now. I know it will take them a very long time to be actually getting them up. I do get this around right there on the Hellions right there as well, and I'm just trying to do as much damage as I possibly can. However, my opponent is playing Terran. Terran can lift up their buildings and they can fly them across the map. And while he still has a bunch of units over at the natural right now, and I likely will be able to kill those, I also know that my opponent just flew off with 2 command centers, and I have no idea where those went. I also know that the main production of my opponent is actually on my side of the map, because that's where the barracks were positioned, and I know that he likely is gonna be in still an okay position, because he can be dropping down mules. Mules give you a ton of income. However, I did do a crippling amount of damage just now, and I will likely be able to do a little bit more in just a second. Gonna try and nuke down this command center to the best of my abilities, and I'm gonna have to look around the map very shortly to try and figure out exactly where my opponent's buildings are located. Obviously, there's multiple bases on this map that he can be utilizing still, and I'm gonna be mining out my main base very shortly. Since my opponent has just arrived at fresh mineral patches, he's not gonna mine anytime soon. Or he's not gonna mine out anytime soon, and I'm gonna be forced to once again load into the Nydus Worm and go back home. Looks like I found one of his bases in the top right corner of the map. I found another base right here in the bottom side of the map, which is the one command center that he already had. Trying to chip away with that with a couple of Zerglings. Got a couple of Zerglings trying to kill whatever drones they, or whatever they can in the top right corner of the map as well. And I'm putting down a Nydus Worm in the middle of the map right next to his production, because this is where all the depots are. We do end up killing that command center right there in the bottom ground. Also find another command center right here in the bottom side of the map. And I see he has mainly Zerglings right now. If I manage to kill all of these depots, however, that will be a pretty big advantage for me. We're once again on the control of my camera right now. I'm gonna try and nuke down as much as I possibly can. And even though I know that my opponent has more bases mining, I'm feeling pretty good right now. I know that I will be able to do significant amounts of damage, and I still have a lot of units at home as well, trying to produce more and more and more. Now, very shortly, I will be knocking down the rocks from that base as well. There we go. I'm gonna be knocking down those rocks to try and expand towards the north side of the map instead. So instead of taking the usual third, I'm actually forced to take another one. I did split up a couple of my units to go and pick off SCVs in the top right corner of the map. And knowing that I just killed a base in the bottom right corner of the map, I know that he won't be having that many mules anymore. He only has 2 command centers at this point in the time, or at least that's what I'm assuming. And he's likely going to be producing purely Marines. I know he has the option to go for Hellions as well, but Hellions are not going to be a unit that he wants to create against the army that I got. So I'm going to be adding on more and more Roaches right now. Roaches in small numbers are significantly, or Roaches are very good against Marines in small numbers. And I'm gonna be, now that I've knocked down the rocks at the third base, I'm gonna be, or at the natural rather, I'm gonna be expanding towards the third base at the top side of the map. I also managed to pick up all of those units that he had lying, or all of the depots that he had across the map. And I'm gonna try and set up a bit of a surround right here. Gotta be very careful, obviously. Hellions do very well against Zerglings. I tried getting surround right there on the bridge. Just gonna be picking away at whatever I got, and I'm gonna be making more and more and more units. I know that my opponent still has a base mining in the top right side of the map as well, but what I've tried to do right now is just clean up his entire army, knowing that I have a significantly stronger force than he does. Also trying to use that corrosive bio ability from the Ravagers to do as much damage as I possibly can to those units and just zone them out. Make sure that they don't get the damage in. Now, since he doesn't have stim pack, I'm gonna be forcing forward right here as well. He still has a lot of Marines in my natural, but knowing now that I have a lot of Queens left over from that initial aggression, I can actually be transfusing a lot of these spine crawlers as well and break down from my natural. In the meantime, there's an engagement going on the middle side of the map as well, and I'm trying to basically control this at 2 angles right now, attacking with the Queens as well, and my opponent does decide to GG. So absolutely wonky and a wild game. After defending the early game aggression relatively okay, we ended up picking off 41 workers after the Nydus Worm shenanigans and after running across the map literally everywhere. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know down below the like button in the comment section if you want to see more of these absolutely crazy wonky games, because I do have a couple more. Generally speaking, I try and cover more strategy and whatnot, and these kind of games are just wild and there's very little to discuss as far as strategy goes. But hopefully this taught you at least something. Let me know what you think of it, and I want to thank you guys all for watching. Have an amazing day. Do not forget to smile, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!